Good afternoon, dear guests. Welcome to MURCIR Wednesday Talks. I'm Zuhal Mertuzuner, Director of Marmara University Research Center for International Relations, shortly MURCIR. Before we start our session, let me to provide a brief introductory remarks about our esteemed research center. MURCIR has been a very important academic excellence center for the past 30 years. And we cannot deny the great contributions of several scholars from the Department of Political Science and International Relations at Marmara University for this valuable background. And Wednesday talks are one of the most important activities of the research center. Its main target actually is about the following the agenda of international relations and to be a discussion platform for the academicians. So by 2020, talks started to be broadcasted via YouTube account and online platforms. That is helping us to reach out the academia at international level, and it increase our accessibility to the rest of let's say the colleagues and friends in the world. So today we have a very prominent guest speaker. I would like to share his short biography. Actually, it is a very difficult job to make a short biography for Professor Ahmet Sözen from the Eastern Mediterranean University. Welcome to our session.
Always a pleasure. Thank you. Good to see you again, Zuhal.
Thank you very much. And the short biography is Ahmet Sözen is a professor of political science with conflict resolution and peace building as his main areas of expertise. He was recently a guest professor in the Unit of Peace and Conflict Studies at University of Innsbruck, Austria. His experience over the last 3 decades includes participating in peace negotiations from the first track in Cyprus as a member of the official Turkish Cypriot negotiation team in the UN-led peace negotiations and active involvement in second track peace initiatives. Ahmet Sözen has been a policy expert of the Diplomats Association for Mediterranean Diplomacy from its inception. This is an organization that brings conflict resolution experts from the Mediterranean countries together to contribute to the solution of conflicts in the region. As diplomats, they have produced numerous policy papers on the solutions of issues in the region. One of the most notable publications, Sözen played a major role as the coordinator, co-editor, and chapter contributor, is Conflict Resolution in the Mediterranean Energy as a Potential Game Changer. He is also a member of Eastern Mediterranean Initiative of GCSP Geneva. Actually, we can expand this biography with more the details, with writings, book chapters. So maybe it's time to leave the floor for Ahmet Sözen. And today, he is planning to discuss, to present us more the backstage of the second track diplomacy and how much it's successful and what it promised us. Thanks again accepting our invitation, dear Professor Sözen, and floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. A very warm welcome, and thank you so much, dear Zuhal, for your generous words on me. It's always a pleasure to be together with colleagues and friends and share our own experiences, research agendas and whatnot. And it gives me great pleasure to be a guest of MURCIR today. Today I'm going to present Track 2 Diplomacy, Building Peace Through Unofficial Channels, by starting from the very basics, but at the same time, I will be also sharing some of my own experience on 3 Track 2 initiatives that I have been part of in the last 2 decades. The 3 which have been public, by the way, because there are many other initiatives that I've been part of, but simply I'm not in the position to disclose them for the reason that they need to remain second track. Now, let's start with the basics by asking where this terminology came from. Well, track 2 diplomacy was first used in the 1980s by a US State Department employee, Joseph Montville, who sort of differentiated all the activities taking place outside the domain of what is known as track 1, meaning government to government interactions. He coined this term to pinpoint the necessity of involving track 2 in solving international cooperation related and other problems which track 1 failed to resolve. So in a way, track 2 came to our lives as complementing or supporting track 1 and even trying to solve problems where track 1 fails to solve. My personal involvement in track 2 and others started in the 90s. I'm going to come to that. But basically what we mean by track 2 diplomacy here is unofficial diplomatic initiatives outside of formal government channels. These are basically platforms for dialogue between sometimes even adversarial groups. And it is used when official relations, track 1 relations, are limited, or even in some cases they are non-existent. For example, when you come to such cases like Lebanon, Israel, here you have 2 countries who do not recognize one another, who do not have any formal negotiations. What do you do? Because these 2 countries are neighbors with serious conflicts. So how do you solve such conflicts when track 1 even lack a contact? So this is a case, this is an example as to where track 2 comes into play. My personal, let's say, exposure to track 2 was in the 90s when I was a PhD student. I met Louise Diamond. I got trained by her in conflict resolution. And also I met Ambassador John MacDonald. These are the people who wrote the book, Multi-Track Diplomacy. What you see on the screen is the copy of the book that they sent to me, Ambassador MacDonald, a copy back in 1996, along with the letter that you also see there. So I was very much privileged. And later in 2010s, I also had the privilege this time to sit as a professor next to Ambassador MacDonald in the same conference. Now, they developed track 2 into multi-tracks, as you can see on the screen. Instead of lumping everything together as track 2, they differentiated within track 2 things like track 2 professional conflict resolution groups, track 3 as business, using business as a platform in fostering peace, or track 4 private citizens, track 5 using research and training in peace building, track 6 peace activism, track 7, very interestingly, religion or religious track as we put it. Track 8 is funding, and the latest one is track 9, where actually it's in the middle of this diagram, where it is actually the media, including not just the traditional media, but also including together modern or social media. Just to give you a taste of what these tracks are, many years ago, I tried to evaluate the peace building process in Cyprus from all these tracks. I'll show you some pictures so that you can get an idea of what we are talking about. If you look at this picture, I think you will have some familiar faces. On the two sides, you have the Turkish Cypriot and Greek Cypriot leader, and in the middle, somebody who was president of the United States, but at that time he was the vice president who visited Cyprus and brought the two leaders together. So this is a typical track one process. You see the two leaders and you see a top-level representative of a country who is trying to contribute to the solution of a specific problem. This is track 3, which is peacemaking through commerce, through business. And in this picture, for example, you have the presidents of the chambers of commerces of 4 different sides. The Greek Cypriot, the Turkish Cypriot, Turkish and Greek, meaning the 2 chambers in Cyprus, the chamber in Turkey and chamber in Greece, who came together and tried to come up with some joint activities in order to contribute to peace building in Cyprus. This was several years ago. So this gives you the picture gives you the idea there. This is also very interesting. This is track 7, which is religion. And it's been almost 20 years, a little bit less than 20 years, that in Cyprus, under the auspices of the embassy of Sweden, religious leaders, including the head of the Orthodox Church, including the religious affairs in the northern part of Cyprus, in the TRNC, and also the Armenian Church, the Maronite Church, and the Catholic Church representatives come together occasionally and have a dialogue. And this has been going on in Cyprus for quite some time. It's been almost 2 decades. Here you see how religious leaders can actually smooth things out, especially help in diffusing tension and whatnot. So now back to track 2, but now you have an idea that within track 2, in fact, there are multiple layers that we can look at things in more detail. Why do we need track 2? Well, it helps us in addressing, in talking about complex regional conflicts, for example. It provides novel, creative solutions when traditional diplomacy, track 1, fails to solve such issues. And especially the more technical the issues are, the more difficult it becomes for track 1, because I mean, you can appreciate the fact that not every leader or every diplomat has in-depth knowledge on very technical issues when it comes to, I don't know, climate change, energy, identity politics, you know, the whole 9 yards. So there, track 2 comes as an important platform that provides the technical details of the experts to come up with novel and creative ideas. Now, track 2 helps us build trust between opposing parties, between adversaries, and it supplements, by the way, not replaces or substitutes official diplomacy. So track 2 is not a substitute of track 1. It's not going to solve the problem. It will create very good ideas. It can even create the best blueprint, but at the end of the day, you need track 1, official diplomats or official sites to sign up on it. Otherwise, it's not going to come into life. What are some of the key features of track 2? Well, first, it is informal and it is flexible. The participants are there in their own personal capacity. They are not representatives of their countries. They are not representing, they are not official representatives of their countries. So it gives them more space. Usually, it focuses on relationships over formal agreements. You try to build trust at the beginning whenever any track 2 initiative starts or takes place at the very beginning. It's usually focuses on building relationship and trust among the participants first before you can move on to talking about serious conflicts. It uses neutral facilitators. It is usually facilitated by neutral actors. And it is very important, it creates a safe space for an open dialogue. And usually in these spaces, we usually use Chatham House rules, meaning that you can use the ideas you hear there, but you cannot attribute them to any name. So names are not there. In order to save or in order to protect the participants, because in some cases, just to give you an idea, or the example I gave before, you cannot in real life bring an Israeli and a Lebanese into the same room because it is a crime according to, for example, Lebanese laws. A Lebanese cannot talk to an Israeli. So how do you do that? In order to save the participants from persecution in their own countries and whatnot, in their own communities, you need to obey to creating a safe environment where their names and whatnot are protected. What are some of the core objectives? Helps us to resolve conflicts through dialogue. So that's the method it is used, dialogue. It builds confidence between parties, between the participants of who are coming from different sides of a specific conflict, or who are coming from basically from different regions or different parts of one region, which has more than sometimes one conflict. The core objective is to create novel, creative policy solutions, and also sometimes it fosters grassroots engagement. It has a lot of strengths, advantages. It encourages creative problem solving. There you can maintain communication during even hostilities going on in a specific country or a conflict. It builds trust between opponents. It addresses sensitive issues safely, where you cannot do it publicly, or track 1 cannot do it publicly due to the nature of the sensitivity of the topic. And it supports formal diplomatic efforts. Sometimes some of track 1 important diplomatic efforts usually starts with track 2 initiatives. For example, the Oslo process in the 90s between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It started as a track 2 initiative and then morphed into track 1 that brought Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin and whatnot together. Now, so far, we've talked about all the positive things about, or all the advantages of track 2, but it does also have some challenges and limitations. I always use the word that track 2 is not a panacea. It's not a cure for all. It's a good tool, but it's not a panacea. It's not cure for all, because it has limited direct influence on policy, whether we like it or not. Sometimes we as participants in track 2 initiatives might be the best person to come together and create the best solution, maybe. But so what, you might say. All right, you solved it in your small group, but what about track 1? So it requires also a way to transfer that to track 1. You need the buy-in of the track 1. So in that sense, it is limited. It requires substantive resources. You cannot do these initiatives free. At least there are some resources involved. There is always also a risk of manipulation by governments if they are aware of such initiatives. Sometimes a government which is not happy with where things are going on track 2, they might try to manipulate. If the track 2 initiative is not careful and it is, for example, it becomes public so soon and so unripe, then it can create unrealistic expectations, which is also not very good. Now, I'm going to give you 3 track 2 examples that I've been part of in the last almost 20 years. There is this Greek-Turkish forum, which was established in 1997. It involves mostly prominent academics, former politicians. Zuhal is one of the fresh members of the Greek-Turkish Forum. So we have been sitting there together. I have been part of this group since 2006 when Greek-Turkish Forum decided to open a Cyprus chapter to include also Turkish and Greek Cypriots in this. Sometimes, of course, for the reason that there are also retired diplomats, they are retired, but sometimes they do keep the kind of channels between themselves and their respective foreign ministries. Sometimes this specific initiative was seen as a track 1.5, not track 2, but track 1.5, meaning that there is a more direct link between the participants and track 1, meaning that the ideas can flow easily or can be transferred to track 1 easily. Usually we produce joint statements, but sometimes reaching a joint statement that would be acceptable to, let's say, 20 people, Greeks, Turks, Greek Cypriots, Turkish Cypriots, is a challenge. Some joint statements can be rounded, and when you round certain things, you also miss some of the impacts, I would say. So in that sense, it has some limited policy impact, I would say. Coming up with creative ideas that could be endorsed by everybody is a challenge for Greek-Turkish Forum. Now, the second initiative, which Zuhal and I have been involved, It started as a dialogue process during COVID. I've been there from the very inception, and it became a regional dialogue group formally in 2023, 2 years ago. It was housed by Geneva Center for Security Policy, and more recently, Swiss Peace also added as a partner hoster of this group. This is a group of people, again, prominent academics, think tank people, retired diplomats, from also when it comes to occupation and specific thing. It's not just international relations, but sometimes you have energy experts, climate experts, and some other technical people in this group. It's basically a group of people who are out there to help solve Eastern Mediterranean region related problems. It has this broad, let's say, intention of bringing all the stakeholders in this region together to a dialogue process, not just state actors, but also non-state actors, as well as whenever you have problems with recognition, non-recognition, you might leave out some of the actors in purely international gatherings, but here the idea is to bring an all-inclusive actors into a peaceful dialogue. That's for the Eastern Mediterranean in general, but it has also some subtopics. We also focus on, depending on our expertise. For example, you have the Cypriot, let's say, problem. You have the Greek-Turkish element, the Greek-Turkish package of conflicts, where Zuhal is a member. And we try to come up with some novel ideas as to how we can address these problems. So in that sense, we have produced so far some policy papers. We had a kind of a road show in Basel Peace Conference, where Zuhal and I were also in the same panel talking about the need for a all-inclusive peace process and dialogue process in the Eastern Mediterranean. So in that sense, compared to Greek-Turkish form, I find EMI a bit more influential when it comes to policy impact. But of course, it is very difficult to measure impacts of such things when it comes to track 2, because in its nature, track 2 is basically happening behind closed doors. So in terms of measuring its policy impact is always difficult. So I'm saying these things with a caveat, take it with a grain of salt. Okay. Now, the third initiative that I've been part of is called Diplomats, the Council for Mediterranean Diplomacy. This has been a group that started its dialogue virtually in the early 2000s. And then in 2023, it became a full-fledged association. It brings mostly conflict resolution focused academics, think tank people, retired ambassadors on a voluntary basis, basically. So it's not that, and nobody's getting paid here for that. In that sense, it's experts in the Mediterranean region, the wider Mediterranean. So this is larger than Eastern Mediterranean. So we have people not just from Turkey, Greece, Israel, Cyprus, Jordan, Egypt, but also Italy, France, and beyond. So it has a lot of thematic focuses. Gaza is one. For example, normalization of Turkey and Egypt is another one. There is a one on Israel-Lebanon maritime issue, now Israel-Lebanon border issue. So it works on thematic issues. We have produced manuscripts, like collected volumes of how to solve specific conflicts in the region, as well as dozens of policy papers. But at the same time, diplomats hold frequent track to both virtual as well as face-to-face dialogue groups. And it also invites track one, UN, EU diplomats for private briefings, so that there is a close interaction between the participants and policymakers. And by far, comparing the three, it seems like, to me, that despite it has been 2 years from its formal establishment, diplomats have been quite successful. I mean, this is a relative thing, of course, but it's quite successful in bringing a lot of policy issues into discussion. So this is the kind of, the screen shows you my observations in a very summarial way. GTF has limited policy impact, EMI has some policy impact, and diplomats definitely has some more than the others. Now, I'm going to skip, for the sake of time, a couple of things that I can also say more on GTF, EMI, and diplomats, but let me focus on some of the success factors on track 2. Well, first of all, if you want a successful track 2, from the very beginning, you have to be able to pick the right participants, meaning that the participants should be people who are credible in their expertise, in their capacities to produce novel ideas, but at the same time, rational ideas in terms of solving the existing conflict. So the credibility of the participants, very important. For successful, for it to be successful, you need clear communication channels in the workshops and in the gatherings, but at the same time, you should also have clear communication channels with outside, with the other actors. Could be track 1, could be other initiatives that you might try to join forces. If you want a successful track 2 initiative, you should find ways of connecting this with formal processes, meaning that you need to find ways of channeling the ideas that you create in track 1, in track 2, to track 1. You need connection to transfer the novel ideas from track 2 to track 1. And finally, if you want a track 2 to be successful, it needs to be a sustained engagement. Usually, if it is one shot or two shots, it's very difficult to expect success, because as I mentioned earlier, in any track 2 processes where you bring people, despite they are there in their own personal capacity, but nonetheless, at the beginning, they come with their own biases of the other within quotation marks. So it takes time for them to build a relationship and a sense of trust, so that once they do it, then it becomes much easier to work on resolving the problems, because they don't have to do positional bargaining, because they don't represent their respective governments. They are there in their own personal capacity. But you need some time to build that trust among themselves. So that's why it needs to be a sustained engagement. All right? Long lasting. Okay. There are, where do we use track 2? Well, in many areas: maritime border negotiations, energy resource sharing, cultural exchange programs, environmental cooperation. I was invited this past February to Innsbruck, where they had a conference on the role of higher education in peace building. And I was pondering on the idea of, is there space for track 2 diplomacy that we can utilize in higher education, in helping in peace building? Yeah. So what are some of the key takeaways before I turn the floor to Zuhal? Track 2 complements and supplements official diplomacy. It doesn't substitute it, as I said before. So it's not a panacea, it's not a cure for all, but it can be used as a way to supplement and complement track 1. It builds trust through informal channels, even during the times of higher tension in a conflict. So it's very important that some sort of dialogue continues even during the time of tension in a conflict. It does require patience and commitment. That's why I was talking about in the previous slide that it needs to be a sustained engagement. And I think the most important aspect of track 2 is that it creates pathways to peace, because it has the capability to generate novel ideas, creative ideas, which are lacking in official negotiations, simply because they are so structured and so rigid. One of the most important strengths of track 2 is to come up with novel ways of solving problems. And once track 1 has the political will, hopefully, if they want to solve a specific conflict, they don't have to start from scratch, because the blueprints, the roadmaps, have already been created in track 2. So I'll leave it at there, Zuhal.
Okay. Thanks for this detailed information about these 3 different, let's say the second track initiative. Actually, they are really valuable. As you mentioned, I experienced some good meetings with a few of them. And I believe the potential of the second track diplomacy, actually, and as you explained very well, we need to work more. And that was very interesting for me to have a reference to this, the role of higher education institutions, and maybe as a part of this higher education mechanism, professors and students, how we may contribute to this peace building mechanism is very critical and important question. Actually, as a center, research center, we were trying to integrate some of our students to cooperate to produce maybe some common papers with Greek students. I mean, the Turkish and Greek students may come together and they may work something, for example, the environmental problems in agency and how to overcome that problem can be a common project title for a group of Turkish and Greek students. So that may create something positive, but actually it is very limited. So what is referred here by referring to, let's say, the role of higher education and peace building is much something bigger. And also we were talking about the importance of this peace teaching. So what kind of the education mechanism must be developed to teach people, or especially young people, to think about peace. But it is very much developed, especially in Norway and some partially in Switzerland. And actually, we don't have enough capacity in our country, especially about providing a teaching mechanism for a group of students. I have so many things in my mind that maybe it is better to leave the floor for our guests. We have two guests from our university. One of them is Muzaffer Şenel. He is a researcher now outside of the country. Maybe he may introduce himself. And Zeynep Bostan is the vice chair of our research center. Would you like to have any question? The floor is yours.
Hocam, hi. Thank you for your, let's say, the very deeply and thought-provoking speech. But I would like to ask something differently than you are mostly focusing on. Zuhal also brings to the context in the context of the peace and also the conflict. Just on the most focusing on. Generally, it's connected with it. As we met also in UCLA meetings in Prague. Just because this meeting is apart from the conflict, it is about the deep in the or sometimes projecting. I would like to ask about the projecting the foreign policy or projecting the relations, that how it will be impact to do so on and so forth, that this track to diplomacy will create. One thing is. The second one is about to the, mostly, which is do we made any kind of distinction between the wiser committees and the track to diplomacy meetings and the summit meetings? I mean, summit meetings among to the non-diplomats. Yeah.
The first, thank you so much, Muzaffer. The first question you are asking is how track two ideas impact foreign policy?
I mean, about projecting the foreign policy, that about the future relations, like in the case of, for example, Turkish-Italian, there was before that Turkish-Italian forum, Turk, for example, that has been established to deepen the relations. It was 2008, 2013. After that, we don't have, after 5 or 6 meetings,
Right,
it doesn't work about. For example, this is again Turkish-British forum or Turkish-Slovakian forum, which is also, there is no, let's say, big issues, let's say a conflict about that, but about somehow deepen and also to enlarge the relations in different dimensions and so on and so forth.
Look, I'm not familiar with, other than Greek-Turkish forum, I'm not familiar with other track two in Turkey specifically, since I don't live in Turkey. But of course, the Greek-Turkish forum was established at the beginning in order to help diffuse tension. At the beginning in 1990s, late 1990s, there were, as far as I know, some retired admirals, high-ranking generals in Greek-Turkish forum, in addition to diplomats and prominent academics. So the idea there was how to prevent things like EMEA, Kardak, and other type of tensions from happening. So in that sense, to a certain extent, I think it served its purpose. That in the joint statements and whatnot, so far that I've been aware of and I've been part of the last almost 19, 20 years in Greek-Turkish Forum, it has always preached the common sense and restraint and cooperation and dialogue. So in that sense, I think that it has been, to that extent, successful. But, you know, depending on it, sometimes if the foreign policy of a country is to develop relations with a specific other country to its maximum, I think it's a good idea for the country to encourage, to foster track 2 initiatives. Just an example, if Turkey wants to foster its relations with Egypt, for example, after the so-called normalization, then rather than just leaving it to track 1, the 2 countries should also invest, should also, I'm not saying officially support, but at least politically be more supportive of business to business, education to education, research to research groups to sort of come together and develop such relations that having conflict in track 1 becomes too costly. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
I totally agree with that. I mean, UCLA meetings that
By the way, we're not supposed to talk about those meetings.
I know, but just we are together here. That's why I said.
Yeah.
Thanks for your question, So actually, maybe it is important to ask another question very briefly, because I know we are coming to the end of our time, but maybe it is important to refer the importance of multilateralism and remembering importance of in this age of polycracy. Today, the states are trying to get adapted to this new atmosphere, and that's why maybe the style decision-making is changing. What do you think about this, and how this penetration of different mechanisms to this decision-making may change, and what could be the role of these tracks of diplomacy for the further decision-making mechanisms?
Zuhal, you asked me the $60 million question.
Yes, sure.
We are going through a very important time. Sort of tectonic shifts are taking place. This is a systemic change, a kind of, we are in the moment of power transition, which I don't know how long it's going to last. Supposedly, we are evolving from the post-Cold War unipolar US hegemonic so-called liberal globalized rules-based international order to something else. That something else is some sort of multipolarity, what some call multi-order, what some call multiplex, to cite Acharya, Amitav Acharya. I don't know yet, but what I can see is that although the old system, although it called itself liberal, global, rules-based, it has never been truly liberal, because there were also dictators and autocrats which the West, the democratic West supported. And it has not been truly global because it left out some of the countries. But nonetheless, there were some rules-based system, although some of the rules were not really applied to some. So you got my point. It has its own deficiencies and whatnot. But that the so-called liberal values like democracy, like multilateralism and open markets, all these three basic values are under incredible challenges and incredible attacks worldwide. Instead of multilateralism, as you know, we are going through transactionalism and compartmentalization of issues. So unfortunately, I don't see anytime soon where multilateralism on a global scale will be dominant again. We are moving into this multiplex or multi-order where even the transatlantic is not there anymore. What we know as the West is not there. You have the Trump America. I don't know whether it will survive Trump and it will rebound and come back to be part of this West that supported these sort of norms and values. I'm not sure, but maybe Europe itself, with some of the core, could be an island or could be another, let's say, small order that supports these liberal values. But then you have BRICS and you have some other multilateral institutions who are going to their own directions. So when it comes to multilateralism on a universal sense, I don't see any universal, let's say, organizations sort of becoming stronger, just the opposite.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. It is a very difficult question to understand, to see the future at the end. We are not forecasting here for the next storms waiting for us. It was a very important contribution to our series, your valuable speech. I'm sure the followers of the MURCIR account will be informed a lot about the second track initiatives. It was a pleasure to host you. I hope to have another chance to talk to you about another interesting topic because your other research teams are really attracting our interest. Hope to meet you again. Thanks again for your attendance, for being here with us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Have a nice day and hope to meet again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.